Well, when we think of Old St. Vincent, we usually think of the campus down at Latrobe. But there's another very important part of St. Vincent that often isn't seen. It's the ridge property. And as I say a few words of introduction, I'm going to just turn on a slideshow here that'll help us introduce what we're talking about. The ridge became important early. I mean, like as early as the early 1850s, Boniface Wimmer purchased property up there to to acquire some important issues that were needed down below. He sent the brothers up there to work the property. One of the big issues they needed was timber to build the buildings. And the brothers had a sawmill up there. They cut trees and made big beams and planks. And also another issue up there was farming. They needed to have food down below for the monks and the students. So there was a good bit of farming went on up there. Growing, potatoes was always a big issue, and I imagine cabbage too for sauerkraut. At one time, not long after St. Vincent was founded, there was something like 16 horses and a good number of cows and more than 100 sheep and hogs up there. They were doing, business. I mean, they needed to have stuff to keep the place down below going. And eventually, the ridge became a place where the monks could go up and have some days off, a little bit of free time to kind of rest and recover and, just kind of get their mental circuits cleaned up. But I want to take a look at these things. I'll go through these pictures one by one, and I'll say a little bit about them. And that means I'm going to have to go through a few of them. This is the view of the complex of buildings. It's a drawing I did in 1970, and it shows these are living quarters. These are buildings where you can live in. This was the first building there, built in 1852. This one was built about 1865. The chapel, the church, I'm not sure when this was built. This is a barn over here. And all those buildings that I show you there are still there. Now, from out around where that vantage point was of that drawing was a fire tower. This had nothing to do with St. Vincent. It was the state of Pennsylvania had a series of fire towers on the ridges to spot forest fires and to be able to call in help to combat the forest fires. This is the group of buildings that I was talking about. This is the central building, the big stone building, built about 1865. This is the chapel. And this is the earlier building, built about 1852. This is the front of that stone building, over here, from about 1865. This building over here, which you can hardly see, was the first building there of this complex. And right down the road was another building. This was a log house. It was a two-story log house. And it was a very old structure, probably the first building up there. And I am not proud to tell you this, but I was among the people that tore that down. And I do recall that as we were taking the logs down that built the place, I mean, this was all exterior kind of stuff on it, but interior, what was the structure of the place was logs. And each and every one of those logs was identified by a Roman numeral. They had that place figured out before they built it. This is the view from the air, Google Earth shot. The building, the old log house was over here. And these buildings over here, this was the barn. This is the main house. This is the, actually the 1852 structure. And this is the chapel. This is a place across the road. And there's a building up here that we're going to look at. Eventually. This is a view looking off the roof of the main house. This is the barn out there. That's that building I made reference to. This is the barn. And the main house, the church. This was actually I was told it was a post office at one time. Now this is the building that sat right up in here. As far as I can tell, it's gone now. But there was a potato cellar downstairs. This door gave entrance to a place where potatoes were kept. I mean, there was a big farm up there. They made a lot of produce to send down below, and they kept the stuff down here in the cellar. The upstairs was a place where farm implements could be kept. Over here, on this far side, was just a corner of that building we were just looking at. And you can see as late as 1970, there was still farm work going on. And just right over here, outside past this view here, we're going to see something else. Another building. That building. By 1966, I did a shot of it, a little drawing. I remember looking back in this part back in here, there was a blacksmith shop one time in there. They did a lot of work at the Ridge, and they needed somebody up there who could take care of equipment and machinery. And as late as the 1960s, there was still an anvil in there. Someone told me that this front part was a post office, which I have no reason to argue with. The building going in front of this, right past the Ridge places, was one time a main route up on top of the Ridge. And here is that building I was telling you about in more recent times. Actually, some of the early Benedictines were out there working, developing their surveying skills. The Ridge was a good place to do that because there was a lot of property up there where you could go out and survey. This is another building up on the Ridge. It was a chicken coop. And I think in the next shot, we'll be able to show you right here. This is where it was. And a recap, this is the barn. These are the buildings. This was that building I referred to as a post office and blacksmith shop. Over here was that place that had a potato cellar that is now gone. Up here was the old, I think of as the Urim house, which was the log built building. A lot of the work time on the Ridge was spent working in the early days. In the first 50 years of St. Vincent's history, there were more brothers than priests. I mean, they needed people to work, to do stuff, to get stuff done. And the Ridge was a place to go to work for the first, the earlier days. And as you look at these horses, you can see the gears they have on them were ready to go to work. These weren't saddles. They were harnessed for getting work done. And here's a fellow ready to go out and rake some hay up at the Ridge. And as time went on, the farm down on the main campus became more productive, and the necessity of wood, big planks and large timbers, was not as great because they had most of the buildings built. And so the Ridge became a place where people from the monastery would go for some time out. These guys are having some watermelon. And here we see St. Vincent's first automobile, a Model T. This is sometime around 1916 when Father Mark and Father Cornelius brought the old Model T up to the ridge for trying the old Model T out, or maybe just getting out for a day. Here we go. Again, I like these views from up in the air, kind of give a sense of what's going on. The next thing we're going to see is probably over here, this building, the chapel. That was the Ridge Chapel. It was, first of all, for the monks, and then the people around there came to church there, so it became the parish church of the people on the ridge. This is another view I did of it. Around 1970, it was a new church was built out on Route 130 for the people on the ridge as a parish church, and this became simply a church or chapel that was used by the people at the ridge, the monks. This shows an outing. One day, this is the front of the church, and this is the big stone house in the background. And people from St. Vincent came up for a day out and some time at the ridge. And here is where we started. And I believe that's where we'll say so long. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.